Let us start with a prayer. Shrutismriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavatpadam Shankaram Lokashankaram Sutra Bhashya Pranetaro Vedantabja Prabhakaro Vande Parasparatmano Badarayana Shankaro. Good afternoon and a very warm welcome to everyone. I am Manu Kashyap from Advaita Academy. Today we have a very special guest, Dr. Niranjan Sahaji. He was also present with us yesterday. He will be continuing day 2, session 2 of Bhakti in Advaita Vedanta as part of this Weekend with Wisdom. Those who have joined us today, I'll just brief about Dr. Niranjan Sahaji. He's currently working as an assistant professor at the Department of Philosophy, Kaliachak College, University of Gaurbanga, West Bengal. He has completed his PhD from Department of Religious and Philosophies, School of Oriental and African Studies, University of London, on the topic Philosophy of Advaita Vedanta according to Madhusudana Saraswati's Buddhartha Deepika. Today he will be continuing Bhakti in Advaita Vedanta. Yesterday he briefly laid out the foundations for the concept, and he also mentioned how Madhusudana Saraswati's views are about Bhakti in Advaita Vedanta. Viewers, if you have any questions, please post them in Q&A box and not in chat box. Niranjan Sahaji will take those at the end of the session. Niranjan ji, please start your session now.
Gurave Namaha. So, in continuation to our talk yesterday, I'll be just dealing in a bit detail as to how Madhusudana Saraswati, one of the famous post-Shankara Advaitins, tried to accommodate bhakti in the tradition of Advaita Vedanta. In our yesterday's talk, I just tried to give a brief outline of what bhakti is and the presuppositions of Advaita Vedanta, I mean the basic principles of Advaita Vedanta, and how the basic principles of Advaita Vedanta are in consonance with the very term or the very conception of bhakti or devotion. In today's talk, I will just explain in bit greater detail how Madhusudana, particularly in his works, the commentary on Bhagavad Gita called Gurartha Dipika, tried to accommodate bhakti in this system. So let me just utter that these two verses as I wanted to refer to yesterday. In the introduction to his commentary on Bhagavad Gita, there are 46 verses. Verse number 36 and 38, he has mentioned, as I was referring to yesterday, that after getting liberated, I mean, once you are Jivan Mukta too, you are prone to, have bhakti. That means, maybe not that, as somebody was asking, I mean, of course, the organizer was asking, the audience was asking yesterday, that once you are liberated, then where is the place of bhakti? What is the need of bhakti? So I was trying to answer that time, I mean, bhakti is needed means what? Bhakti is not, I mentioned yesterday that liberation according to Advaita Vedanta is not a resultant state. That means an aspirer doesn't seek for attaining liberation, because in Advaita Vedanta you are already liberated. You are already one and same with the supreme reality Brahman. Only due to avidya and ignorance you are not able to identify that you are one and same with the supreme reality, quote and unquote, Brahman. So, if liberation is not a resultant state in Advaita Vedanta, then what for we are aspiring? So here, just by quoting the Bhagavata Purana, Madhusudana mentioned that after getting liberation, or after getting liberated, liberated in the living, liberated in, the Jivan Mukta. Liberating, what is called obtaining liberation in this stage, in this life. So he mentioned that জীবন মুক্তি দশায়ন্তু ন ভক্তি ফলকল্পনা অদৃষ্টা ইত্যাদি but তেষম স্বভাব ভজনম হরেহে. Again, he quoted Bhagavad Purana. Yesterday I just mentioned that. Attaramasya munaha nirgrantha aprakrame kurbanto hoitikim bhakti itham bhuta guna harihi. That means both the verses say that in the Jivan Mukta Dasha too, once you are liberated, then also you need, you are not what is called looking for bhakti. You are not trying to what is called attain bhakti, but it becomes swabhava. It becomes the nature of that liberated soul. That means it becomes natural for him to have bhakti, to pray to Almighty or to worship Lord. Okay, so you could say this is a bit unique, like in the tradition of Advaita, that after getting liberation, also it becomes natural. It becomes spontaneous for the aspirant to have bhakti. And we mentioned yesterday that this reference, of bhakti is very much available not only in the what is called theological works of Madhusudana, even in his polemical works like Advaita Siddhi, Advaita Ratnarakshana, in Siddhanta Vrinda too, we find sporadic references to bhakti. So we'll be basically concentrating on Madhusudana's Gurartha Dipika, that is the commentary on Bhagavad Gita, and I will be trying to substantiate Madhusudana's view with the support from Shankara's works. Shankara's works, particularly Bhagavad Gita commentary and other commentaries like other Prasthanottari Bhashyas and other available works related to Advaita tradition. So here, Madhusudana has made a distinctive attempt at accommodating devotion to the Lord, Bhagavad Bhakti, in the metaphysics of Advaita Vedanta, in his commentary on the Bhagavad Gita. Okay. So our aim will be to make a critical assessment of this attempt of Madhusudana Saraswati. That is how far he was successful, or how far he he was acceptable by other Advaitins. Of course, there are criticism that he failed to some extent, but at the same time we'll be showing, in our conclusion, no, being an ardent Advaitin, Madhusudana's place in the tradition of Advaita is what is called place of Madhusudana in the tradition of Advaita will be what should I say, will be remembered as a staunch bhakta. So we'll be taking into account both his works and other traditional works of the Advaita Vedanta and other well-known texts dealing with devotion, thereby bringing out his special contribution in the field of Advaita Vedanta. So first, let me give a prelude to Bhakti and Bhakti Yoga in the Bhagavad Gita and the Gurartha Dipika. Yesterday, I was just occasionally referring to the verses of Bhagavad Gita where the concept of Bhakti is, explicit. So today we'll be just we'll be referring initially to the concept of bhakti and the bhakti yoga in the Bhagavad Gita in relation to or in comparison to the Gurartha Dipika, that's the commentary on Bhagavad Gita by Madhusudana Saraswati. So see, though Shankara, Madhusudana and many other commentators of the Bhagavad Gita have accorded a significant place to bhakti in the schema of attaining liberation, Ramanuja maintains that the Lord has promulgated in the Bhagavad Gita Bhakti Yoga as aided by Karma and Gana Yogas, and upheld by Vedanta as the means of attaining the supreme end of human life, that is Parama Purushartha, that is salvation or liberation, Moksha, thereby professing Bhakti Yoga as the principal means of liberation in relation to other two means, that's Karma Yoga and Jnana Yoga. That means, you see, I was referring to yesterday that it is often criticized by the theistic Vedantists, particularly the Ramanujas, Vishtadvaitins, and the Dvaitins too, that in the schema of Advaita Vedanta, you cannot accommodate bhakti. Why? Because if you accommodate bhakti, then duality arises. But in the commentary of Bhagavad Gita by Ramanuja, uh, the propounder of Vishtadvaita Vedanta school, he mentioned that Bhakti Yoga is the only means to attain liberation, though that must be supported by other two nishtas, that means other two yogas, which is Karma Yoga and Jnana Yoga. Here, the Bhakti Yoga is the most significant part of the means of liberation in the Bhagavad Gita, is explicitly uttered by the Lord Himself when He says that He is attained by exclusive devotion only and not by any other means. See, in chapter 11, 53, we have that, thus, as I am and as you have seen me, I cannot be seen with the aid of the Vedas, austerities, gifts, and sacrifices. So, only through exclusive bhakti can I be seen, thus, Arjuna, and known as I really am, and enter into enemy chamber, like it is in chapter 11, 54. So in the text itself, in Gita itself, the Lord says that by exclusive devotion only one can attain liberation. I mean, one can attain me. Of course, we mentioned yesterday that in Bhagavad Gita, we find the amalgamation, we find the presence of other margas. I mean, there could be a combination of other margas while um, Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and Jnana Yoga. So we cannot claim that Bhakti Yoga, Bhagavad Gita only propagates Bhakti Yoga. No, we'll be saying that there are all the three yogas, namely Karma Yogas, Bhakti Yoga, and Jnana Yogas are referred to in the text. So, though the notion of devotion is understood in some verses of the first group of 6 chapters in the Bhagavad Gita, in connection with the performance of disinterested actions, niskama karma, with a sense of dedication to God, etc., and also in the observance of Jnana Yoga in the third group of 6 chapters, sporadically, the detailed discussion of bhakti is found in the middle 6 chapters. That means 7 to 12. So, in this is the unique contribution of Madhusudana. Madhusudana has classified, has divided the Bhagavad Gita into 3 khandas. Of course, this division is there by other commentators too. We see it in that tradition of Nimbarka Vedanta also this is found, but it is Madhusudana who explicitly divided Bhagavad Gita as tripartite, Kandotratmaka, following the khandas of the Vedas. So in the first 6 chapters, it is said that the 6 chapters deal with Karma Kanda, the middle 6 chapters deal with Bhakti Kanda, and the last 3 chapters deal with Jnana Kanda. In the introduction to the Gita commentary, Madhusudana clearly mentions that devotion is absolutely necessary for removing the obstacles in the path of self-realization, and also that devotion can be classified into three types. Mixed with, these are, the first one is mixed with rights and duties, karma misra. Then pure Shuddha Bhakti, I mentioned yesterday too, and mixed with knowledge, Gyana Misra. In the course of his commentary on Bhagavad Gita 13:10, Madhusudana explains devotion to be love, priti for Lord Vasudeva. See, here I am just entering into particularly this Madhusudana's core discussion in Bhagavad Gita as to how he defined bhakti. Okay, and we'll be saying explicitly that he didn't deviate from his Advaitic standpoint. Because though apparently it shows that his discussion looks like a Advaitin, but we'll be seeing that his non-dualistic approach is, is it just subsists, his views. So the Supreme Lord, Murjana explained devotion to be love, priti for Lord Vasudeva. So for him, devotion is nothing but priti or love for Lord Vasudeva. And we have seen that for Lord Vasudeva is nothing but the Supreme Brahman for him. So the Supreme Lord arising from the knowledge that he is the most excellent among all. That means he curves like this, that Bhagavati Vasudeva Parameshwara Bhakti Sarvotkrishtatva Jnana Purvaka Pritihi. So, how he discussed? He discussed that Lord is Lord Vasudeva, the Supreme Lord, arising from the knowledge that he is the most excellent among all. So, this is his definition of bhakti. Of course, it's not the only definition that he has given. In different occasions, he just defined bhakti. It is one of the occasions just we have mentioned here. So, for him, Lord Vasudeva is the Lord Vasudeva. How the supreme knowledge of Lord Vasudeva, how it arises? It arises from the knowledge that he is the most excellent among all. So, he holds that it is unwavering or bhavichari, as it cannot be obstructed by any adverse cause at all, and that it causes knowledge. Madhusudana substantiates this with the support of a testimony. How he says, as long as love for me, the Lord Vasudeva, doesn't arise in itself, it cannot be free from the association with the body. Again, this is basically the introductory verses, introductory verses. Yeah, this is basically, no, it's not the introductory verses. It's basically in the proper commentary of the text. Again, in his Bhakti Rasayana, I mentioned yesterday that is the only compendium of Bhakti written by a staunch Advaitin. In Bhakti Rasayana, Madhusudana distinguishes between Brahma Vidya and Bhakti. So how he distinguishes? He maintains that while the conceptual cognition of the Lord, Shabikalpaka Vritti, by the melted mind, wherein his form, Bhagavat Akara, is reflected, is known as Bhakti. See, this is the typical definition of Bhakti by an Advaitin. How he mentions it? He mentions that the conceptual cognition of the Lord, Sha Vikalpaka Vitte, by the melted mind, wherein his form, Bhagavat Akar, is reflected, is known as Bhakti. So, as we know in Advaita Vedanta, how we have the knowledge? We have the knowledge of something when that Akara, that the form is reflected in our mind, then only we have the knowledge of that object. So accordingly, Madhusudana also has defined bhakti that the form of the conceptual cognition of the Lord is reflected in the mind when the mind is melted. Okay. Whereas he mentioned that uh, the melted mind, when its form is reflected as bhakti, the modal change in the form of non-dual Brahman, bereft of attributes, nirvikalpaka vritti, when the mind is not melted, is called Brahmavidya. So, what is Brahmavidya for him? Brahmavidya is the non-dual, the modal change in the form of non-dual Brahman, which is bereft of attributes, nirguna. Hmm? When the mind is not melted, I mean, at this mind is not melted, it's called Brahmavidya. So the distinction between Brahmavidya and Bhakti is that in the Savikalpaka Vritti, Savikalpaka Vritti, when the Savikalpaka Vritti is reflected in the mind which is melted, the Bhakti arises, whereas in the Nirvikalpaka Vritti, the Nirvikalpaka Vritti, which are reflected in the mind, which is not melted, is called Brahmavidya. That means, in the context of Brahmavidya, because there is no vikalpa, there is no attribute, because Brahman is attributeless. So in this connection, uh, Shankara holds that Shankara holds that Shankara holds that devotion is worshipping the Lord. Bhajanam bhakti. With single-minded concentration, Ananya Yoga, in an unswerving conviction that there is nothing higher than Lord Vasudeva, and hence he alone is our refuge. He also maintains that Shankara maintains that this devotion, being the means to knowledge, is also known as knowledge. Shacha Ganam. So for him, he is equating devotion with knowledge. So for him, devotion is nothing but knowledge, or vice versa. So while explaining Bhagavad Gita 8:10, Shankara holds that devotion means worshipping the Lord. On the other hand, Shankara sometimes defines bhakti as jnana. In his opinion, the word bhakti employed in Bhagavad Gita 8:22 means devotion characterized by the knowledge of the self, jnana lakshana, atma vishaya, bhakti. What he mentioned? He mentioned that devotion characterized by the knowledge of the self. Bhakti is nothing but the devotion characterized by the knowledge of the self. Jnana Lakshana Atma Vishaya Bhakti, as is been stated in Bhagavad Gita 7:17. While in Bhagavad Gita 12:20, it means devotion characterized by the knowledge of the higher reality. We are quoting Shankara only. Paramartha Jnana Lakshana Bhakti. This is Shankara's definition of bhakti in this context. In Bhagavad Gita 18:54, it means, Shankara means, devotion as worshipping the Lord, bhajana, which is characterized by the highest knowledge, uttama jnana lakshana bhakti, as has been stated in Bhagavad Gita 7:16. In Bhagavad Gita 18:55, it means devotion characterized by the steadfastness of knowledge. That is, Jnanonistha Lakshana Bhakti. All the definitions what I have mentioned here, given by Shankara, is like you see the same only. He just interchangeably he is using the term Bhakti and Jnana. For him, bhakti is also characterized by Jnana only. Okay? So this view that devotion is characterized by knowledge is admitted by Madhusudana as well in his commentary of Bhagavad Gita 18:54, 55, etc. Again, according to the Nighontu, the Vedic concordance, the Vedic concordance, the Nighontu says the term Sheva, service, bhakti, devotion, and upasti, prayer, etc., yield the same meaning. So, as per Nighontu, the Sheva, service, bhakti, devotion, and upasti, all the three yield the same meaning. Thus, these two explanations of Madhusudana and by Shankara, respectively, You see, the explanations of what devotion means for Madhusudana show him not only as a devotee, as admitted by the dualist, but also as an ardent devotee who upholds the non-dualistic view, that is Jnana Bhakta, Jnani Bhakta. Furthermore, we see through the Bhagavad Gita commentary, Madhusudana refers to Madhusudana refers to the instances of several devotees like Brajavashins, Uddhava, Shanaka, Narada, Prithu, Shukadeva, etc. In chapter 7, particularly verse number 16. Then Sridhama, uh, Bhagavad Gita commentary on 725, 926, etc. Ajamila, we find this reference in uh, commentary on chapter 930, 931, etc. Pullada, this reference is there in chapter 7, chapter 9, chapter 18, etc. Dhruva, Gajendra, Ambarisha, Gopis, etc. These references are there throughout the text, so we're not mentioning the specific verses here. So, who are spoken of quite often in the Bhagavad Purana too. I mentioned yesterday, Madhusudana, while commenting the Bhagavad Gita commentary, commenting on the Bhagavad Gita, even writing the Bhakti Rasayana, he followed the Bhagavad Purana as the principal testimony, as the best, but are seldom mentioned by the supporters of non-dualistic Vedanta. So, for a thorough account of those devotees and their experiences, Madhusudana refers to the reader in the Guratudipika commentary, Guratudipika, particularly verse number 16, chapter 7, 65 of chapter 18, then 18 to 66, etc. to his Bhakti Rasana. Further, in a typical manner, Madhusudana conveys his devotional yearning in verse-wise form at the beginning and end of some of the chapters of the commentary. We have mentioned yesterday in the introduction, even the concluding part of chapter 15 and the concluding part of chapter 18 and the end of the commentary. Here just, uh, he was overwhelming, like, he was praying Lord Krishna as nothing but the Supreme Brahman, non-dual Brahman. Okay. So after this sort of counter bhakti and its significance in the eyes of Madhusudana and Shankara, we may discuss just the definition of bhakti along with its nature, forms, etc., as given by Madhusudana in his Bhakti Rasayana. We have just mentioned how Madhusudana and Shankara respectively talk about bhakti in the Bhagavad Gita. Now, we may briefly refer to the Bhakti Rasayana, where Madhusudana has defined bhakti, and it's with the elucidation. Of course, we know that Madhusudana has commented on the first two ullashas of Bhakti Rasayana, though other ullashas are there, but the commentary is not available. We were not sure whether he tried to. It said that he tried to write commentary on the entire text, but maybe before that he passed away. So, yeah. So, in the Bhakti Rishna, while stating the general characteristic of Bhakti, Madhusudana maintains that Bhakti is the that incessant flow of the modification of the mind of devotee. As I mentioned yesterday, sir, Bhakti is nothing but a continuous flow of the modification of the mind. Here also, you see, you should point out here also, it is not the kind of bhakti advocated by dualistic Vedantists, of course. So it is the unique definition of bhakti. Bhakti is the incessant flow of the modification of the mind of the devotee, directed towards the Lord of all, Sarveshwara. When it, that means the mind of the devotee, melts by the spiritual discipline related to the Lord, which is observed by the devotee. Okay, so in Advaita Vedanta, you see that of course you have to undergo the procedures, the disciplines to make you fit mm, to make you fit to obtain liberation. So here he's saying that this, after undergoing that spiritual disciplines, one's mind is melted, and that in the melted mind, the modification of the mind, the vritti is reflected and is nothing but bhakti. So here, the spiritual discipline, yeah. So while giving his own exposition on it, Madhusudana, with the support of the Bhagavad Purana, like Bhagavad Purana 7.1, 329, 11, and 329, 12, etc., says that the spiritual discipline related to the Lord, Bhagavad Dharma, means the hearing of the greatness and other virtues of the Lord. Hearing of the greatness and other virtues of the Lord. And not necessarily the performance of religious practices. See here? Here you see, yesterday we mentioned the Navavidha Bhakti. So here what is he telling? He's telling that here the Bhagavad Dharma is means the hearing of the greatness and other virtues of the Lord, and not necessarily the performance of religious practices. So here also you see that here also he follows that Advaitic path only, okay, not the path followed by the dualistic Vedantis. So Madhusudana maintains that in the Advaita tradition, modification of the mind, vritti, always means the mind's assuming the form of the object of that modification. So means the mind, bhakti is what? He says here, the modification of the mind always means the mind's assuming the form of the object of that modification. It is also clearly, what the Advaitins say. So accordingly, bhakti is held by the learned as a mental state assuming the form of the Lord by the mind, when it, that means the mind, melts and possesses and constant flow like the stream of the Ganges that arise as the instinctive reaction to the stimuli such desire, kama, anger, krodha, etc. as a result of hearing the virtuous qualities of the Lord, Bhagavad Guna Sravana. See here, here also we see this is the how bhakti is held by the learned, as a mental state as being the form of the Lord. Here also Vaishnava's definition, the discussion. Of course, it is as part the Advaitic view only. So when he says that the characteristics of the unqualified bhakti yoga or the nirguna bhakti yoga are as such. So these are the characteristics of nirguna bhakti yoga. Okay. So further, in connection with explaining the unqualified nature of devotion, Brahmananda Saraswati, one of the famous commentators of Madhusudana, he commented on the Advaita Siddhi, he commented on the Siddhanta Bindu too. He mentions that, quoting the same Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavad Purana text, as is done by Madhusudana, the Bhagavad Purana 329, 11 to 12, Madhusudana maintains in his commentary on the Siddhanta Bindu of Madhusudana that Nirguna Bhakti is the highest means of attaining liberation. So, as Madhusudana maintains that Nirguna Bhakti is required to, by Nirguna Bhakti only you can attain liberation, Brahmananda Saraswati made it clear that Nirguna Bhakti is the highest means of attaining liberation, following Madhusudana. Now, just as we have discussed this definition of bhakti admitted by Madhusudana and corroborated by the Bhagavad Purana, there are two authoritative works on bhakti later than the Bhagavad Purana, giving for the first time a systematic exposition of bhakti in an aphoristic manner and taking Lord Vasudeva as the object of supreme love. Paranu, Paranurukti. These works are the, as you know, of course, in the tradition of bhakti, these two works are very ancient one, the Shandilya Bhakti Sutra and the Narada Bhakti Sutra. While indicating the essential nature Swarupa of bhakti, these two works speak almost in the same tone. It is said in the Shandilya Bhakti Sutra that bhakti is the highest love for God. You just follow. So how? The same thing is Sam also defined, Shankara also defined. That is what? Bhakti is the highest love for God. Sha para mukti ishware. That means Sha para mukti ishware. It is Shandilya Bhakti Sutra 1:1:2. And again, that bhakti is the principal means as others. That means the means of Jnana, Yoga, etc. depend on it. Sha mukhartha sha mukha mukhatra pekshitvat. Yeah. So here means what? Is the principal means, is the principal means as others. Okay. So it is also one of the principal means like Jnana Yoga or Jnana Yoga, etc. So in this connection, we can say that Narada Bhakti Sutra holds that bhakti is indeed of the nature of supreme love. Sha tasmin parama premarupa. So Narada Bhakti Sutra says what? Bhakti is the in the nature of, is indeed of the nature of supreme love. Sha tasmin parama premarupa. Some are of the opinion that knowledge alone is the means of attaining bhakti. Tasyaha Ganameva Sadhana Itteka it is also said in Narada Bhakti Sutra 28. And that others hold that they, that means the means of knowledge, and that of bhakti are interdependent. Ananna asraya asrayottam itti anne. It is also said in Narada Bhakti Sutra 29. So it's a statement which also finds support in the Bhagavad Gita. See here the definition what Vasudana gave, Shankara gave of bhakti also is supported by by two when what is called testimonies, the basic the compendiums on bhakti, namely Narada Bhakti Sutra and Shandilya Bhakti Sutra. So when we find reference of this, in the Bhagavad Gita itself, in the chapter 18:54, he says, having become Brahman, serene of spirit, he doesn't grieve, he doesn't crave. Equable to all creatures, he achieves this ultimate bhakti of me. In Bhagavad Gita, 18:54, this is explicitly mentioned. So here actually, how bhakti is defined by Shankara, by Vasudana, and how it is defined in the Shandilya Bhakti Sutra or Narada Bhakti Sutra, we find there are more or less the similar view. And this is also supported in various places in the Bhagavad Gita too. So Madhusudana's understanding of bhakti as love for the Lord in terms of his knowledge, the knowledge of the Lord in reality, can be backed up with the views of these two Bhakti Sutras and the Bhagavad Gita. It itself. We have seen that. So let me just discuss below, the role that this spiritual discipline, that means the Bhakti Yoga, plays in the attainment of liberation, as admitted in the Bhagavad Gita in particular and in the Advaita Vedanta in general. We see. So now we see at the end of Bhagavad Gita, chapter 6, particularly the chapter verse number 46, 46 of chapter 6, uh, which mainly deals with yoga as a means of liberation and paves the way for devotion as another means of liberation, that has been discussed primarily in chapter 7. The Lord extols the yogin by saying that the yogin excels ascetics, tapusins, men of knowledge, Gyanins, and even men of action, Karmins, and again that among all the yogins, one who worships the Lord with his inner self, absorbed in the Lord and with faith, Suddha, is the greatest, in the greatest. So, there, you mentioned that, of course, among all the yogins who are absorbed in devotion, to me, they are the Uttamam, the greatest. So thus the Bhagavad Gita corroborates the view that among the aspirants of liberation, the devotees are always held in the highest esteem. Madhusudana explains in this connection that the Lord who is worshipped as Lord Narayana, the Lord of all lords, may be treated by the devotees as either qualified Shaguna or as non-qualified Nirguna. So we find that the Madhusudana's interpretation of Bhagavad Gita, text. I mean, of course, we are not dealing with the entire, commentary. We are just concentrating at the point where Madhusudana, explicitly talks about bhakti. Bhagavad Gita says that again. Bhagavad Gita again says that four kinds of people of virtuous deeds. Shukritins. Bhagavad Gita says how? They are the suffering, arthas, the seekers for knowledge, jigashus, the seekers for prosperity, artharthins, and the wise gyanins. The wise who are in constant union with the Lord and hold single minded devotion to Him excel and so are dear to Him. It is mentioned in chapter 7. While explaining these verses, Madhusudana finds the path of knowledge and devotion to be parallel. So for him, the path of devotion and the path of knowledge are are equally acceptable, equally reliable. So it is asserted by Madhusudana that a devotee desiring nothing in return for his love for the Lord is wise. Madhusudana maintains that among the above mentioned four types of people, as we have just mentioned, that that Shukritins were the Atras, then the Arthas, then Jigashus, the Artharthins, and the Ganins. He said that among the four types of devotees, devotees, the wise who are the knower of reality by virtue of being free from all desires excel, as they are always engrossed in and solely devoted to Lord. Here also we find Madhusudana's Advaitic interpretation only. So he is not different from their indwelling selves. So he is endowed with single-pointed devotion, eka bhakti to God, because he doesn't have any other object of attachment, anurokti, vishaya. The idea is that since the Lord, the Supreme Self, who is non-different from the indwelling self, is extremely dear, that means he is an object of unconditional love, nirupadi premapada, premapada. So, to the wise. So the wise too are very much dear to the Supreme Lord. So how is to live? See, here the idea is that since the Lord, the Supreme Self, who is non-different from the indwelling self, okay, that means the Jivatman, is extremely dear. So how to say? To say that Nirupadi Paramashpada to the wise. So it like the seeker who is equivalent to, who is equated to, who is not different from the Supreme Self, is extremely dear to him. Why? Because he is also an object of unconditional love to the wise. So the wise too are very much dear to the Supreme Lord. So Madhusudana also says that a wise is he who is ever characterized by the knowledge that consists of the direct realization of the nature of the Lord. Bhagavad Tattva Sakshatkara Jnana, who has overcome the realm of Maya and all whose desires have ceased. Thus, the devotee possessing disinterested love, Nishkama Parama Bhakti, Bhakta, is none but the wise. So, for him, who is wise? Wise is he. Sorry, bear with me. Just there is a power cut.
Is there any problem?
There is a power cut. Sorry,
Yeah, I
yeah,
think
load shedding.
internet
I think it will come. Just okay.
your internet is fine, correct?
No, internet is fine.
Okay, okay,
Today is
Niranjan.
Sunday, no, from the morning, like there is a power cut 4 or 5 times, you see. Maybe
Okay,
some
okay.
work is going on, you don't know. But
Yeah, we can
it will
hear
come.
you and see you
Hopefully it will come,
clearly.
yeah.
No problem. You continue.
So, thus, the devotee possessing disinterested love, Nishkama Prema Bhakta, is none but the wise. So, here also, Madhusudana equates the Gyanin is nothing but the Nishkarma Bhakta. Again, he refers the reader to his Bhakti Rasayana, where he has elaborately dealt with the devotion that by its very nature is love for the Lord, Bhagavad, yeah, Bhagavad, yeah, Bhagavad Anurokti Rupa, along with the varieties of devotion as well as of the devotees. In the Bhakti Rasayana, we have mentioned that he has defined bhakti. That means he has given the definition of bhakti and the nature of bhakti. Here also he has explained different kinds of devotees too. So thus, among the four types of sorry, sorry, just yeah, thus among the four types of people of virtuous deeds we have just mentioned, Madhusudana has characterized the first three types, the sufferings, the arthas, they are the Brajavasins, the princes inspired by Jarasandha, Draupadi, Gajendra, etc., the seekers to knowledge uh, uh, like King Janaka, then Sutadeva, Uddhava, etc., and the seekers for prosperity like Shugriva, Vibhishana, Upamanyu, Dhruva, as those devotees who possess desire, Shakama, and who have also overcome the realm of Maya through worshipping the Lord. While the fourth type, the Gyanins, are those devotees who are devoid of desire for the fruit of their actions. That means the Nishkama, and have thus overcome the realm of Maya. So here also, among the four types of devotees, as described in the Bhagavad Gita, Madhusudana gives the Advaitic interpretation. He just lends support to the Gyani Bhaktas, because the Gyani Bhaktas have overcome the realm of Maya, the bondage. So Prithu, uh, yeah, uh, sorry, Madhusudana also holds that Sanaka, Narada, Prahlada, Prithu, Shukdeva, etc., may be cited as examples of such devotees who have no interest for the fruit of their actions and are also endowed with knowledge. How they are? They are Nishkama Bhakta Gyani. So they are Gyani, at the same time they are Nishkama Bhaktas. So While the gopis, Akrura, Yudhishthira, etc., are the examples of the devotees characterized by lack of self-interest and pure love, Nishkama Shuddha Prema Bhakta. So here also see the his Advaitic interpretation of the bhaktas. Uh, Again, we find in the chapter 12 of Bhagavad Gita, hmm, in response to Arjuna's question regarding the relative superiority of meditation on the Supreme Self as compared to meditation on the imperishable, Kshara and Akshara, So the Lord declares the former to be the more effective than the latter. According to him, the followers of the former who meditate on the Supreme Self, being imbued with supreme faith and steadfastness in him, are considered to be the most adept among all yogins. So, commenting on this verse, Madhusudana also maintains that devotees who absorb their minds in Lord Vasudeva and consider him as the supreme God, Parameshwara, Brahman with attributes, Shaguna Brahman, the soul refuse Ananya Sharana, regard him as an object of unbounded love. Accordingly, they constantly meditate on the Lord, who is the Lord of all Lords of Yoga, Sharva Yogeshwara Atma, Sharga Yogeshwara, Sharga Yogeshwara, sorry, yeah, Sharva Yogeshwaranam Ishwara, all knowing Sharvagga, and the abode of all auspicious quality, Samasta Kallana Guna Nilaya. That also has a form, Shakara. Such devotees always remain absorbed, Nitya Yukta in him, with utmost faith. So here also we find that Madhusudana lends support to bhakti. Though, like there are different types of what is called the seekers, but he's lending support to those who are absorbed in devotion at the same time, who are free from the bondage, that means who have realized, um, who have obtained knowledge. So who are the Jnana Bhaktas. So in the 11th chapter also we find that after showing his universal forms to Arjuna, the Lord says that by no means other than exclusive devotion is he seen in his full forms, known in reality and attained. It's like in chapter 11, verse number 53 and 54. You can see Madhusudana explained these two verses in the in his inimitable way. He says that according to the scriptures, the Lord is known only through exclusive devotion, which is nothing but being established in him in the form of unbounded love. Yotishaya Priti. For him, not only is he known through unswerving devotion, consistent with the scriptures on the nature of Sarvana, Manana, Nididhasana, etc., on the Upanishadic sayings, the Lord is also directly realized in his true being by the devotee. Moreover, with the removal of nescience, that is avidya, and its products as a result of direct realization of Lord's true nature, he is also attained in his true nature by the devotee. Thus, in the verses 11, in the verse 11:54, the statement of the Lord that he is seen in his full forms, known in reality, as attained, refers to three different stages of Bhakti Yoga, where exclusive devotion, that Ananda Bhakti, subsists uniformly. So this is Madhusudana's interpretation of that verse, that he said that though in that particular verse that it shows that there are different ways to attain him, but when attaining the Lord, but the Bhakti Yoga subsists in other two yogas too. So Shankara makes the point more explicit, as I mentioned earlier, that we'll be just showing, what's called, we'll be referring to Shankaras also to substantiate Madhusudana's point, because both of them are from the same tradition. So Shankara makes this point more explicit when he says that exclusive devotion in this context means that devotion which never turns to any other objects but the Lord, and that by which is comprehended nothing else but Lord Vasudeva by all senses, thereby implying that there exists nothing in reality that is other than the Supreme Self. Here also see, it is also typical, of course, because it's Shankara's interpretation, it is also typical Advaitic interpretation. So the teaching of Bhakti Yoga in all its dimension is found again in a nutshell in the in the utterance of Lord in the Bhagavad Gita, where he says that quoting chapter 11, verse number 54. He says, "Only He comes to me, Pandava, who acts for me, who holds me as the highest, who is devoted to me without self interest and without any animosity against any creature." In the light of Shankar's commentary, Madhusudana explains this statement in the following way. How? He maintains that one who performs actions sanctioned by the scriptures for the sake of the Lord alone, to whom the Lord alone is accepted as the supreme object to be attained, Parama, Parama Praptabha, who is bereft of longing for external objects, by her Vastu Spriha Shunna, and who doesn't have animosity, Vidvesha towards anybody, including those who identity of so Madhusudana, following Shankara, regard this verse as expressing the essence of teaching of the Bhagavad Gita. I mentioned that the Gita Shastrasya Sarvabhutam Artham, thereby extolling Bhakti Yoga as a means of attaining the Lord. That's liberation. Shankara too holds that this expression that expresses the supreme secret as well as the essence of all scriptures. Shastra or Paramam Purusha. After mentioning the relative merits of these two types of meditation, as I mentioned, that Shara meditation on the Shara and meditation on the Akshara, we find that self with devotion, and that on the imperishable really upon the superiority of those who undertake the former. Those who
I think we have lost Niranjan ji. He will be joining very soon. Niranjan ji? Niranjan ji?
sorry, my apology due to this, this. Am I visible? Am I visible?
You're not visible, but and your audio is also breaking a lot. So we cannot hear you, Niranjan.
The internet connection.
Respected participants, Niranjanji is facing some power cut issues. He'll be back very soon. Please bear with us for 2 more minutes. Hello, Niranjanji, am I
Yes,
audible?
yes, 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 yes.
Yeah,
The
okay,
power
okay, you
cut
can
now,
continue.
is it audible and visible?
Yes, yes, you are
Fine.
visible and audible.
So my apology, my sincere apologies to the audience.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, so, so not only is he known through unswerving devotion consistent with the scriptures, on the maturity of Sravana, Manana, Nididhasana, etc., on the Upanishadic sayings, the Lord is also directly realized in his true being by the devotee. So Madhusudana explains that see here the seeker also fits himself, makes him fit, as we mentioned yesterday, and the audience asked yesterday that only after Brahma Gana only that. Bhakko Gana only, the scriptures, the knowledge of the scriptures, obtaining after obtaining knowledge of the scriptures only one one attains the liberation. Here also Madhusudana is telling the same thing, that one makes himself fit after undergoing the discipline, the Savanamana Nididhasana, and how the Lord is also directly realized in his true being by the devotee. So, moreover, with the removal of avidya and its products as a result of direct realization of the Lord's true nature, he is also attained in his true nature by the devotee. So in the verse 1154, the statement that the Lord he is seen in his full forms, known in reality, and attained refers to three different stages of Bhakti Yoga, where now this exclusive devotion, Ananya Bhakti, substitutes I just mentioned just now. So here we see, we, um, we see, uh, we see again in again, yeah, even again in the chapter 12, we see that the magnanimity of the Lord towards his devotee uh, is revealed when the Lord says that even those who are unable to observe practicing contemplation reach the Lord by performing actions as service to him. You know, it is there in chapter 12, verse number 10. Madhusudana, in his imitative way, explains that with the performance of actions like hearing and chanting of the Lord's name, Sarvana Kirtanadi, etc., known as the Bhagavata Dharma, the devotee attains perfection that is typified as non-different from Brahman. So due to purification of the mind and emergence of knowledge. So in the concluding verse of the 12th chapter, Madhusudana is also mainly concerned with devotion as the means of attaining the supreme self, the uh, I mean supreme self, and he mentions that this verse shows a blending of the path of knowledge with that of devotion. According to him, the practicing the elixir of law, that is dharmamrita, with extreme faith, one becomes very dear to the Supreme Lord. One becomes very dear to the Supreme Lord. Yeah, and Supreme Lord, um, he maintains that though by practicing the elixir of the law, dharmamrita, with extreme faith, one becomes very dear to him, the Supreme God, who is none but Lord Vishnu. And though the elixir of law, that is dharmamrita, becomes inherent in him, even so, it should be undertaken by one who desires emancipation, wishes to know the reality of the self, and wants to attain the highest state of Lord Vishnu. Thus, in the case of one who aspires after the unqualified Brahman on account of having perfection in meditation on the qualified Brahman, there is the direct realization of the reality put forth in the Upanishadic texts as a result of recurring practices of Savana Manuna and Nididhasana. So they claim that since the Upanishadic great sayings like that the word Tattvamasi leads to liberation, one should seek out the meaning of the term that is Brahman Tat, in that the word is thus established in the in the sixth in the first in the immediate chapters in the six intermediate chapters in the of the Bhagavad Gita. So here see, as I referred to the verses, particularly from 7 to chapter 7 to 12, we see how Madhusudana supported, or how Madhusudana explained that the Supreme Lord Brahman uh, is obtained through bhakti. So Shankara's non-dualistic interpretation is also noteworthy in the context where he says that Shankara maintains that those devotees who are renunciates and who also take resort to devotion characterized by the knowledge of the highest reality, Paramartha Jnana Lakshana Bhakti, are dear to the Lord. So here, all the what is called the discussion pertaining to Bhakti Yoga given by Madhusudana and Shankara, and sporadic, these occasional references to um, Sandila Bhakti Sutra and Narada Bhakti Sutra, we see Bhakti Yoga plays an important role, and we can say Bhakti Yoga is alone, which is the supreme, which is the greatest, which is much greater, or which is superior to other means, that is Karma Yoga and Jnana Yoga. So let me just mention briefly the nature and constituents of Bhakti Yoga. Then we'll be just seeing how Madhusudana has made his unique contribution to accommodate Bhakti in the field of Advaita Vedanta. So we have thus shown that the utmost importance of devotion involved in Bhakti Yoga is the means of attaining the Supreme Self. The nature and components of that means are indicated, means that the means of Bhakti Yoga is indicated by the Bhakti Yoga in one of its important verse, like chapter 934. Here he says that it mentions that Bhakti Yoga is having manana with bhakti, jajana with bhakti, and namaskara with bhakti. While reflection, manana, is used in the sense of meditation, dhyana, worshipping, upasana, contemplation, nididhyasana, etc. Jajana means worshipping God, and namaskara means prostrating oneself before the Lord. All these elements indicate bhakti, their combination leading to the formation of the Bhakti Yoga propounded in the Bhagavad Gita. So this view also may find support in the Nighanta. There is a Vedic concordance where the term Seva, we just mentioned, Seva, Bhakti, and Upasti mean the same thing. While explaining the verses, Madhusudana says, agreement with Shankara that a person who has fixed his mind on the Lord, that is manana, with devotion, Madbhakta, and adoration, Madhjajin, having saluted him through body, mind, and speech, Namaskara, and who has also accepted God as a supreme end, Matparayana, having taken sole refuge in him, Madheka Sarana, after uniting his own mind with the Lord, surely reaches the Lord or the Supreme Self, who is by nature self-effulgent, Shaprakasha, supreme bliss concentrate, Paramananda Ghana, bereft of all disturbances, Sarva Upadrava Shunna, and untouched by fear or hell. Shankara makes his non-dualistic stance explicit when by the Supreme Self, Shankara means here the self of all being as well as the Supreme God. So we see here also, like the importance of bhakti in attaining supreme love, supreme goal. I mean the supreme goal, that is the non-dualistic Brahman. Uh, so extensive references are there, but due to paucity of time, we'll be just particularly mentioning uh, the his unique contribution here, because throughout the commentary on Bhagavad Gita, we'll be seeing the particularly when, as we mentioned, that the intermediate 6 chapters, that means chapters 7 to 12, deal with Bhakti Yoga, mainly Madhusudana's contribution, Madhusudana's elucidation on these 6 chapters explicitly give a perfect place, accommodate and accommodate bhakti in a suitable manner, in the befitting the propositions of Advaita Vedanta. So of course, we mentioned yesterday that Bhagavad Gita, none can say that Bhagavad Gita, the three yogas, that is Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and Jnana Yogas, are only dealt with, dealt in the first second, sixth, and third 6 chapters exclusively. I mean, respectively, you can say no. We find the references of bhakti, jnana, and knowledge interchangeably. I mean, you can say the throughout the text. Okay, so nobody can say like, okay, only karma yoga is there in the first six chapters, and jnana yoga is there in the last 6 chapters, and bhakti yoga is there in the middle 6 chapters. No, so we find the references of karma, jnana, and bhakti, or karma, bhakti, and jnana throughout the text. Okay, though Bhagavad Gita explicitly, mentions bhakti as one of the important means of attaining liberation. So, uh, we'll be just now showing his unique contribution in the field of Vedanta here. Yeah. Before we go to his unique contribution, I mean, Madhusudana's contribution in the field, since our talk, the title of the talk is the place of bhakti in Advaita Vedanta. That's why we have chosen Madhusudana Saraswati. I mean, Madhusudana Saraswati and his works to highlight our point. Uh, one should understand that one should know whether how far Madhusudana was um, influenced by the dualistic Vedantins too. And it is said that that we have the bearing of Madhusudana is very much there on the later dualistic Vedantins, particularly the Gaudiya Vaishnavas. But it is also said that Madhusudana was influenced by the dualistic school like Vishishtaadhyayins too. So, of course, it is explicitly there found that Madhusudana's work is referred to. I discussed this thing in the last month's lecture that Madhusudana's work is um, explicitly referred to by the later Gaudiya Vaishnavas, though we don't find any explicit mention of the Gaudiya Vaishnavas in the Madhusudana's work. So, we'll be just mentioning uh, the strategic view of Prapatti as an aid to Bhakti Yoga, and it will be helpful for us to understand whether Madhusudana's interpretation of Bhakti is influenced by the Vishtadhyayins concept of Bhakti, or vice versa. In conjunction with Bhakti Yoga as a means of attaining liberation, the Bhagavad Gita talks about Sharanagati or Prapatti. It is the complete surrender of oneself to the Lord. As an aid to the, that means having by nature, uh, having by nature a universal appeal, Prapatti facilitates the removal of obstacles that may crop up in the path of Bhakti Yoga. So Prapatti may forms the spirit of devotion necessary to obtain the grace of the Lord. We find a couple of verses in the Bhagavad Gita where the Lord advises uh, Arjuna to surrender completely to Him and also to take refuge in Him, so that the Lord Himself take care of him. Here, Arjuna is the representative of his devotees. Now, so having thus shown the importance of Bhakti Yoga as a means of attaining liberation throughout the text, in the concluding chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, that is chapter 18, the Lord again advises Arjuna to take shelter in him only after abandoning all sorts of uh, righteousness, and tells him that he will release him from all sins that is Arjuna might have committed. He thereby emphasizes the need of one's total surrender to the Lord for attaining liberation. The pertinent verse reads, it is of course verse in that Sarvadharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Braja, the 1866. Abandoning all rights and duties, take refuge in me only. I will liberate you from all sins. Don't grieve. So Madhusudana's detailed explanation of this verse is noteworthy here when compared with that of Shankara. So I mentioned yesterday there are explicit references to the disagreement with Shankara. So, but with much humility, Madhusudana, uh, with much humility, Madhusudana has just expressed himself. So, when compared with that of Shankara, some discussions of these two interpretations, will help us in understanding the respective philosophical attitudes of these two eminent figures. So, how far this? I'll be just why I am mentioning this, just to point out to the audience that being an ardent Advaitin, uh, uh, how far Madhusudana deviated from Shankara's interpretation, or I mean, or how far he's close to the interpretation of the dualistic school. So Madhusudana maintains that when the Bhagavata Purana speaks of taking refuge in the Lord, the employment of the word all indicates abandonment of rights and duties, dharma, without any exception, irrespective of whether they are caste duties, varna dharma, or the duties of the station of life, ashrama dharma, or the duties of a general nature, samanya dharma, or whether they are the duties that are being carried out, hmm, Vidyamana or Kriyamana, or those that are to be performed, Avidyamana or Karishamana. Having abandoned all such rights and duties, the devotee should take refuge in the Lord, who is the one without second. See, here also this Advaitic interpretation only, who is the one without second, Aditya, who uh, superintends all our rights and duties, and who is the sole arbiter of their results. Sarvodharman, 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 yeah, yeah, Sarvodharman, Dharman, Sarvodharmanam, Adhishtanam, follow, Falodataram, cha. So, Sarvodharmanam, Adhishtanam, Falodataram, cha. With the firm conviction that he will succeed through sheer grace of the Lord alone, the devotee should worship with incessant thinking. It is anukshana bhavana about Lord Vasudeva, who is the embodiment of the amalgamation of supreme bliss and infinity. See how he describes Lord Vasudeva. Lord Vasudeva is equivalent to the supreme bliss, the infinity. He's telling that is that Lord Vasudeva is the amalgamation of supreme bliss and infinity. Paramananda Ghana Niruti Niruti Mana Paramananda Ghana Niruti Manantam Mana Antam. So how is that the amalgamation of supreme bliss and infinity? Paramananda Ghana, sorry, Paramananda Ghana Murti Mantam. So the idea is that he should constantly think of the Lord with an excessive love. Prema Prakarsha, that is preceded by the idea that the Lord is the highest reality and that there is nothing outside him. Such a mental modification is bereft of all ideas about the non-self and is like a continuous flow of oil, toilodhara but avichinna. So Madhusudana says further that the phrase uh, abandoning all dharmas, Sarvadharma Parityajya, in the verse 1866, uh, he says that the one doesn't enjoin renunciation of actions. So it is just a typical deviation from Shankara's interpretation, as the Advaita Vedantas, Advaita Vedantas, in Advaita Vedantas, the place of renunciation, sannyasa, uh, uh, is very much important. But what he says, this verse doesn't enjoin renunciation of action. How? Rather, what is directed here for all the stations of life, that is brahmachari, the student, householder, grihastha, forest dweller, varnapastha, and renunciate, sannyasin, is that they should surrender themselves completely to the Lord. Bhagavad Eka Sharana, Bhagavad Eka Sharanata Matra. After disregarding, after disregarding another actions, even if they are directed. Madhusudana holds that the phrase abandoning of all dharmas doesn't mean abandoning all righteous and unrighteous actions. As this fact is already known from the scriptures, endorsing renunciation, Sannyasa Shastra, and the scriptures asserting prohibition, Pratishedha Shastra, respectively. So this phrase is also not to be treated simply as an expression that endorses renunciation, that Sannasa Vidhayaka Vachana, as what is intended to be directed here is surrendering oneself completely to the Lord. Thus, it is to be taken as a mere reiteration because the phrase in question is neither an injunctive sentence, vidivaka, nor one that proclaims renunciation. While the acceptance of both these senses of it leads to a defect known as sentential split, that is Bhakka. See how it is also, like it's also unique interpretation of Madhusudana. So he's telling that here this. Hello.
Yeah, please continue, Niranjan.
Fine. Okay. So yeah. So here also see here also he is just in his unique way. Madhusudana explained that Sarvadharma Parityajin means not only like renunciating all action here. Instead of renunciating all actions, he is endorsing the view that one should completely surrender to the Almighty. So, besides having viewed it as the reiteration of abandoning all rituals and unrighteous, the assertion complete surrender to the Lord has to be meant by the latter phrase of the verse. So, seek me alone for refuge, mamikam sharanam prajo, thereby asserting that here renunciation of dharma is not intended to be meant by the phrase abandoning all dharmas. So this verse 1866 has been admitted as the concluding statement of the Bhagavad Gita scriptures, as it maintains surrender to the Lord to be its final teaching. Without this surrender to the Lord, even renunciation doesn't fructify. The renunciation doesn't give rise to its result liberation. Here also we find the support of bhakti yoga, the support of complete surrender to Almighty. So here, yeah, we find here that Shankara's interpretation, understanding of the verse as the attainment of the Supreme Self is identified with the individual self after renouncing all sorts of action, poses a sharp difference with that of Madhusudana. According to whom, this means that the attainment of the qualified Brahman is possible through utmost self-surrender. Further, it is interesting to note that though Madhusudana expresses a view different from that of Shankara on Bhagavad Gita 1866, he quotes from the latter's work, that is Vishnu Shatpadi. See, in support of his view also, Madhusudana quotes Shankara. So I just told that though there are occasions where Madhusudana disagrees with Shankara, but he kept Shankara. He always follows Shankara as his, what is called the best. So here also he quotes Vishnu Shatpadi, which is one of the many hymns said to have been composed by Shankara in praise of Lord Vishnu, while indicating that Shankara doesn't convey the inner meaning of the verse, which actually talks about total surrender to the Lord. So here, though we find the interpretation of Madhusudana that here that renunciation means is not what is called abandoning all karmas. Here you have to take into consideration the meaning of the latter phrase, that you have to surrender completely, and that must be taken into consideration mainly. So here, though we find the disagreement with Shankara, but at the same time, when he quotes Shankara in order to substantiate his point, his views, it shows that Madhusudana is talking about this point also from an Advaitic point of view too. Um, yeah, so many things are there too. Well, like throughout the text we find, because Bhagavad Gita commentary, Gudaktu is a running commentary on the Bhagavad Gita, and it's like it, of course, though it's a sub commentary, it's a commentary on the Bhagavad Gita, and it is said that Madhusudana has followed Advaitic point of view, but the Gurudipika demands to be it's an unique commentary. It is an independent commentary on its own right. Uh, Now, my dear audience, will be just now concluding with pointing out Madhusudana's unique contribution to the field. Shall I continue
Yeah,
until six?
like we are almost out of time. It is
No,
already.
I know, but I'm just asking you whether, because due to this technical snag, we lost some time,
Yeah,
though we started, I think, on time today.
yeah. On
So, whether if I'm allowed to continue until six or until like I think quarter to six, then I may refer to that. I may just summarize his unique contribution.
I mean,
Shall I
if you have,
continue?
if you still have points to make, you can definitely
Sure,
go.
sure, fine.
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah. So, we'll be just in a nutshell, briefly point out Madhusudana's contribution, unique contribution to Vedanta discourse, particularly on Bhakti Yoga and Gana Yoga. Since the title of our topic is the place of Bhakti in Advaita Vedanta, and Madhusudana is regarded as an Advaitin at the same time, great Bhakta. So he's a Bhakta in the tradition of Advaita Vedanta. So, so far we have pointed out um, uh, his contribution or his view on pure Advaita Vedantic interpretation, and his views on Bhakti interpretation too. So, as pointed out in chapters 1 and 2, the uniqueness of Madhusudanas in the tradition of Advaita Vedanta is generally held to be his attempt at situating Bhakti Marga therein. Particularly here, I mean, um, as I pointed out yesterday and today also, in the commentary on Bhagavad Gita and his Bhakti Rasayana, not only in chapter 1, because the first two ullasas of Bhakti Rasayana, where the Bhakti Rasayana talks about what is Bhakti, how Bhakti is defined, and with the source of bhakti, and then the he talks about different kinds of devotees, okay. And throughout the text of Bhagavad Gita commentary, we see the presence of bhakti, the presence of bhakti, some subsisting, in the other tradition, other views like karma yoga and gana yoga too. So here, um, it contradicts that Madhusudana contradicts the metaphysical foundation of Advaita system. So after hearing this view propagated by Madhusudana, one might think that his view apparently contradicts the metaphysical foundation of Advaita Vedanta. That's why yesterday I gave a preliminary view on what Advaita Vedanta says, though it's a very general view, and what bhakti means. So apparently, it shows that Madhusudana contradicts the metaphysical foundation of Advaita system, though we have shown above that with the textual support that Advaita Vedanta doesn't find any difficulty in accommodating bhakti within its framework from the practical Vyavaharika point of view. We mentioned yesterday that in the Vyavaharika level, there is no problem, there is no difficulty in accepting devotion as a means of realizing the supreme end. So here, most remarkable contribution is that, in spite of being a diehard follower of the Advaita tradition, he has made a bold step through his prolific writings to substantiate the doctrines of Advaita Vedanta while being an ardent devotee of Lord Krishna. In doing so, he finds no contradiction, as is clear from his comments on the Sangshipa Sharirika, uh, Sangshipa Sharirika of Shabakatman, while an unambiguous indication of synthesizing Gyanamarga and Bhakti Marga is found at the very beginning of Sangshipa Sharirika, where the author pays obeisance to the unqualified Brahman called Lord Murari. Madhusudana correspondingly salutes that Brahman who, as an offshoot of religious austerity of Nanda, the adoptive father of Lord Krishna, plays his divine flute for the delight of all the Vrindavana, with his beautiful face similar to the moon and his eyes like a lotus, who, as the real Shatya, infinite, knowledge, and non-dual bliss, Jnana Ananta Advaya Sukha, has been realized by the great sages while attaining liberation, after approaching a teacher and attaining mystic trance or absorption samadhi on that Brahma. Here you see, here Mahishna typically rejoins or typically enunciates, describes the supreme, the Murari, which is the embodiment of our what's called the Ishvara or Shaguna Brahman, Lord Krishna. He's equating, he's describing Lord Krishna as nothing but the supreme bliss, the Advaya Brahman only. So therefore, the unqualified Brahman in Advaita has been charmed by Madhusudana, nothing but the qualified Brahman, Lord Krishna, an object of devotion. And that Nirguna Bhakti Marga is not something new or alien to Madhusudana. Furthermore, at the beginning of his magnum opus Advaita Siddhi, Madhusudana pays salutation Lord Vishnu as the undifferentiated Brahman. Having established the falsity of the empirical world in the first chapter of the Advaita Siddhi, Madhusudana validates the non-dual reality, that is Brahman. But it is interesting to note that at the end of this chapter, Madhusudana eulogizes Lord Huri in two verses as the undifferentiated Brahman, who is also the only essence of Sutis. Again, Madhusudana goes further to compare himself with the all-inclusive Lord Huri. And perhaps this is the reason why Madhusudana, following the lead of Bhagavad Purana, that amalgamates Nirguna Bhakti extensively in terms of admitting Lord Krishna as the unqualified Brahman, admits Bhakti Jaga as an independent goal, even to the extent of admitting it as the supreme goal of human life, Parama Purushartha, in his Bhakti Rasayana. In his comments on the Bhagavad Gita, we referred earlier that chapter 647 and chapter 7, verse 17, 16, then chapter 9, verse number 1 as well. Bhusna hints that describing Bhakti Yoga as an independent path of devotion. At the beginning of his comments on Bhagavad Gita 9, Bhusna asserts that the reality of the Lord, Bhagavad Tattva, and devotion to him, Bhakti, are the means of attaining immediate liberation, Shaksham Moksha, which is talked about Advaitin only. So while elucidating Bhagavad Gita 1866, we just mentioned, he states further that the steadfastness in devotion to the Lord, Bhagavad Bhakti Nishtha, is not only the means, sadhana, of the steadfastness in action, karmanishta, and steadfastness in knowledge, jnananishta, but also their result, phala, and that in agreement with other shastras, the conclusion which is the Bhagavad Gita is surrender to the Lord, So while commenting on verse number 1866, he says that Bhakti Yoga is nothing but the cause and the effect of other two yogas, that is Karma Yoga and Jnana Yoga. So uh, we have noted earlier that for both Shankara and Madhusudana, karma and bhakti are considered in the Bhagavad Gita as the means subsidiary to jnana, which ultimately leads to liberation. We have also noticed that for Madhusudana, the Bhagavad Gita propagates the view that the unqualified Brahman could also be attained through loving devotion to the Lord. Thus, while pointing out Jnanamarga and Bhakti Marga as independent and effective means of attaining liberation in his Bhakti Rasayana, as well as in the Gratadipika, Madhusudana maintains that they are not indistinguishable and vary in terms of their nature, means, goal, and the persons entitled to both adhikaris. According to him, while devotion is a conditional modification of the mind, Savikalpa Vritti, we have mentioned, and assuming the form of the Lord after it becomes flexible or melted, Dovibhuta, the knowledge of Brahman, Brahma Vidya, is an unconditional modification of the mind when it is not flexible or melted, and has only the self without a second as its object. While hearing of the compositions describing the exalted qualities of the Lord is the means of devotion, listening to the great sayings of Vedanta like that the word, etc., is the means of Brahmavidya. So, while the fruit of devotion is the intense love for the Lord, Bhagavad Vishayaka Prema Prakasha, Bhukarsha, that of Brahma Vidya is the cessation of avidya, which is the primal cause of all evils. While all beings are entitled to devotion, the mendicant of the highest order, Paramahansa Paribrajaka, with the position of the fourfold means, Sadhana Chatushtaya, is eligible for Brahma Vidya. Further, Madhusudana asserts that for both devotion and Brahma Vidya, the results of meritorious deeds, Shukrita, such as sacrifice, charity, etc., are the same. Just as the just as in the case of heaven, Sharga, and the desire for knowledge, Vividisha, that is the inclination to undertake either the means of knowledge or that of devotion, results from the performance of meritorious deeds prescribed in the Vedas. And in this way, both these means, that is devotion and knowledge, overlap each other, and that Jnana Yoga incorporates bhakti also. Further, while Brahmamita is restricted to a few, that bhakti yoga can be undertaken by everybody, irrespective of caste, sex, etc., is made clear again by Madhusudana in another context in his Huilila Vyakha. I mentioned yesterday, Huilila Vyakha is one of his theological work. Mashura maintains that not only people of certain sex and age, etc., is permitted to observe Bhakti Yoga, as is the case with Agnihotra, etc., but it is recommended for everyone, irrespective of sex, caste, etc. With this utterance, the women folk, Striloka, young, Bala, matured, that Paura, and the aged, um, that Vaiska people also are indicated by the sage Rishi. So, in spite of the fact that Madhusudana admits both the means of knowledge and devotion as independently effective in attaining liberation, yet his penchant seems to be for devotion, as is found throughout the Gurata as well as the Bhakti Rasayana, um, especially in his bold assertion in one of the introductory verses in the Gurata as I mentioned at the beginning, that even for a Jivan Mukta, Bhakti remains spontaneous. Besides his verbatim reproduction of um, Bhagavad of Bhakti Rasayana, which also conveys the same fact, that is the spontaneity of devotion for the self-immersed sages in the state of Jivan Mukti. He also described Bhakti in the Gratadipika as a link between and subsisting in karma and jnana. Introductory verse 6, 7, etc. In this connection, we have uh, we have pointed out earlier that the views of both Shankara and Madhusudana on treating devotion uh, on a par with knowledge, or at times admitting devotion as the cause of knowledge, need to be taken into consideration. If one has to justify Madhusudana's effort for amalgamating both the means, that is bhakti and Jnanamargas. Devotion as a means of liberation has been eulogized by Shankara in no ambiguous term in his Viveka Churamani, where he says that among all the means of salvation, devotion is supreme, and that contemplating on one's own essential nature, Shaswarupa Anusandhanam, is called devotion. So again, devotion is also regarded by others as contemplating on the true nature of one's own self, Swa Atmatattva Anusandhana. Thus, Shankara's definition of devotion as the knowledge of one's own self, that is the deliberation on the nature, on the knowledge of the self, as distinct from that of non-self, uh, in the present instance, also lends support to Madhusudana's act of equating Jnana, that is the Gyanin, man of knowledge, with Bhakta, devotee. So, besides Madhusudana, a Bhakta doesn't achieve, I mean, for Madhusudana, a Bhakta doesn't achieve anything extra that what a Jnani, the Gyanin does. Why? He's telling that, as we have pointed out earlier, Madhusudana holds that even the grace of the Lord cannot exhaust the prarabdha karmas. They get exhausted only after being experienced by the aspirant. This is typical Advaitic view. So you also find the utility of devotion in the tradition echoed even by the staunch followers of Advaita, like Brahmananda Saraswati. I told that Brahmananda Saraswati is one of the important, commentators uh, of uh, of Madhusudana. While commenting on the Siddhanta Bindu of Madhusudana, Brahmananda goes to the extent of saying that even for understanding the true import of the Upanishadic text, one must have devotion. In spite of all these supports and the clear indication by Madhusudana that the followers, that he follows the Bhakti Marga and treats Nirguna Brahman as non-defined from the Saguna Brahman, Lord Krishna, that is Lord Krishna, his idea of deity as is described in his various works like the Gurata Dipika, Bhakti Rasana, remains transtheistic. Herein lies the significance of his attempt at integrating bhakti with the doctrines of Advaita Vedanta, which also found in the life and works of his great predecessors, Shankara. Like we can just point out one of the modern scholars' view in this context, which will make our whole discussion a bit clear. It is a matter of fortunate circumstances that in the works of Sri Madhusudana Saraswati, we find monistic philosophy being synthesized with devotion, that is Advaita with Bhakti. It is an unusual trend for Advaita as it is commonly understood, but there is inherently nothing strange for Advaita to advocate Bhakti. Bhakti or devotion was indeed a predominant emotion even in Sri Shankara's life, though ultimately Sri Shankara reduces Bhakti to the level of purificatory means. He was a great bhakta of Sri Bhagavan Krishna in his personal form. So our whole discussion, I mean, today's and yesterday's discussion, shows that there is no contradiction in holding, in accommodating bhakti in the trend of in the tradition of the Vedanta, though we have to take into consideration that at the transcendental level there is no place of any duality, and the duality arises only in the Vyavahārika level, and in that level, the place of bhakti uh, can be accommodated uh, in constant, in like following the basic principles of Advaita Vedanta. And I have just tried to give an overall view as to how bhakti can be accommodated in the tradition of Advaita Vedanta. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Niranjanji. It was such a great session on both the days. You
It's,
have
it's an exhaustive, that interpretation, discussion is there. So it might need the great scholars, of course. I mean, like a small person, like, like a
I mean,
Mandavati.
we are all just a drop in this huge ocean. So it is just a huge ocean. I mean, we are really grateful for you, grateful for having you here, and you have elaborated in such a manner. Viewers, if you have any questions, please post them.
Thank you.
Niranjan will address. Uh, I just have one question. We have
Yeah.
from last 2 days we have been saying bhakti, 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 and also Bhagavan in the Bhagavad Gita says that manmana bhava madbhakto. So how to become
Madhyajivan
that
Namaskar.
bhakta?
Please.
Yeah, how to become that bhakta? What is the quality of that bhakta?
See here, I think I referred to that is 1154 or 55. No, that verse. Yeah.
Yes, manmana
So
bhava.
so Madhusudana in his like in imitative way, he also mentioned that he mentioned there are four kinds of bhaktas are there in as referred in the chapter 7 of Bhagavad Gita. But among the four kinds of bhaktas, Madhusudana gave more importance on the Gyanins. The wise are the most acceptable. Wise are the most acceptable according to him. uh, when we claim somebody is Gyani, so Gyani means he has bhakti also in his mind. So while he has bhakti in his mind, that means his mind is already, like you can say, it is already perfect, to achieve that liberation. So a Gyani Bhakta, a Gyani is at the same time, he is a Bhakta, at the same time, he has acquired that knowledge too. So this the combination, the bhakti, that means that discipline which made him to acquire knowledge, is easier for him to attain liberation. So I mentioned the characters he mentioned throughout the text,
Yes,
but
yes.
he gave that complete surrender is required, and complete surrender only will help you to arise that knowledge. And in that text also he mentioned that, of course, he gives more important, like he gives, of course, being an Advaitin, of course, in order to undergo the discipline, like sadhana chatushtaya and all these things, you have to prepare yourself. It's not that not having undergone the disciplines, you are able to acquire knowledge. So Gyani Bhakta is always more important for him.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Niranjanji. You have opened our eyes and you have given a new perspective with Madhusudana
No, no,
Saraswati.
no. I am just
Also,
repeating. I have just repeated. What the
yeah,
earlier
also,
people
yeah,
told, and Madhusudana said. I haven't told
yes.
anything new. No, no unique contribution. I have made.
Yeah, I mean, it was very great listening to you. Thank you so much for agreeing to have come here. And from the entire team of Advaita Academy, we thank you immensely for coming here and speaking about Bhakti in Advaita Vedanta. Viewers, please stay tuned on our websites, Facebook and Instagram, Twitter. We will be also hosting new sessions and we will be announcing all the sessions over there. Thank you so much once again. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha.
My sincere pranam to the academy and the concerned people and the audience too. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Namaste.
Thank you.
Namaste.
Namaste.